So I liked this advisor a lot more, and she worked on slavery, and she was mostly a political historian, but she worked on like Africans and slavery in Latin America. So I switched over to her, and I said I want to do religion and, you know, in Brazil and Cuba, because that's where she specialized in. She's like, okay. So then she's like, do you want to do Catholic Church? Because that's really oversaturated. I was like, no, I don't really want to do that. I was like, what about these, you know, candomblé and things like that? She's like, oh, that is so oversaturated. I really don't advise you to do that. And so at this point, I was determined to make this work somehow. So anyway, I needed to learn Portuguese. So I got a little grant to go to Brazil for this purpose over the summer. And it was basically a situation where they place you in a house, you know, with a Brazilian family. You go to Portuguese classes during the day, and they also take you to all these tourist events. It was through a university in the Midwest. And one night they took us to a condomblé ceremony. And it was about, oh God, that thing was about 5 hours long. And you get it's once the novelty wears off, and it wears off pretty quickly, you just get really bored. And I just started looking around at everyone, because it was mostly like people in the neighborhood coming to the ceremony. I was like, wow, a lot of these people look like they're white. I was just like, that's interesting. I wouldn't expect that.
Sorry, where was this again? This was in Brazil?
This was in Salvador, Bahia.
Salvador, Bahia. Okay.
And so then I started to look more into it on my time, you know, my time off during this program. And I just went to my advisor and I said, this is what I'd like to do. And she's like, no one's ever done that before. I don't know how much you'll find, but it's an interesting project. And that's how I started.
Fascinating. All right. Wow. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so that was when you were studying for the dissertation for your PhD, right? That was when you were trying to figure out your topic.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So when you were doing the archiving, was that before or after that? That was after, right? After you got PhD.
Yeah, no, once I decided on my topic and I passed my comprehensive exams, then I went to go to the archives to do research in the archives.
I see. Wow, okay. So then after that, you did that for a few years. And then what happened after that?
I came back, and then it was time to write my dissertation. That was a very bad year. You know, I had a very complex topic. Also, I had gone through a breakup with my ex of 13 years, and I was going through a lot. And my graduate program is like, they really kind of, I pissed somebody off somehow. And so, you know, I was basically made to take courses that others weren't allowed to. I basically wasn't just left alone to write my dissertation, which most people were. It's like, and others around me were like, man, the DGS, Director of Graduate Studies, has it in for you for some reason. So, I mean, it sounds paranoid, but it's like, yeah, they really did run me ragged that year.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I see. So, okay, so you came back, and then you just had a crazy year.
Mm-hmm.
And then, what happened after that?
I ran out of funding in my graduate program, so I had to get a job. And I was also on the job market at this time. And I had like 2 campus interviews, which were like 4 days long. One was 5 days long. You fly to the campus and you interview with all of the department members at that university. So I was doing that. I was also applying for academic jobs, and those applications take hours to do. So that was another barrier. And then eventually I ended up getting this 1-year lectureship at UT Knoxville.
Mm-hmm. I see. All right. Going full circle then. Have you did any of your research, like any of the studying the Inquisition documents or studying the religions, did any of that help you later on in life?
Well, it got me the job at UT Knoxville, but at that point I was just realized academia wasn't for me. And so, no, it's just a closed chapter now, really.
Has any of the history that you learned, well, I suppose like were there any periods in time in history that you were particularly attracted to from your studies?
Mm, I was basically just kind of going with where the evidence took me, and I wasn't personally interested in it, but I noticed much of the documentation came from the late 17th century, early 18th century. So that period, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you has history come in like have you how should I say like used it in your life since then? Like have you like watching the news nowadays, do you see any parallels from stuff that you learned or anything? You know, has the education you received in history kind of like expanded into other areas of your life in some way?
It's since I live in the South, it's definitely made me see, race relations here in a different light,
Mm-hmm.
and I look at religion in a different light.
Uh-huh. With religion specifically, like how do you see it differently?
I see it as something that's not static. It's something that's very dynamic, and it's subject to outside influences at any one time. And it's like you cannot, separate religion from society and culture.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. With in today's modern times, I mean, it seems like people nowadays are like almost like embarrassed to admit that they're religious. Um, like,
Not where I live. Not where I live.
okay,
It's like
interesting.
actually, I've had weird experiences. Like for the last few years, I've been renting extra rooms in my house to local people. And it's really weird. It's like this, they just kind of presume that I must be religious. And they're really disappointed when it turns out that I'm not, like when they don't see me going to church. I remember one roommate was like seriously upset that I didn't put up Christmas decorations. And I was like, I never told you I was religious.
Mm-hmm.
They get really upset about it.
Yeah, that could be.
So
Yeah, that might be one thing that's different. Like when I was in, I guess in the city, people are kind of like, oh, like, why are you asking? You know.
yeah, in California, yeah, it's not a good thing to ask people if they're religious or what their religion is. I agree.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So, it's interesting that you're like a teacher. Do you ever tell people that, like, the people that are asking about the
Rents.
um, let's see. Yeah, I mean, it was only like 1 year of my life, and that was like way back in 2013. It's just like, yeah, I was once a professor for a year.
for sure. Well, anyway, that was a quick joke, but my the original reason I asked was, do you notice like, well, I guess in the city, right? If there's no religion, if people just are trying to be non-religious, then it seems like there's sort of like the human condition has like a space where religion needs to be there, and if you don't have any religion, then something else sort of fills the void. That's I'm not an expert on this, but that's sort of what it seems to be.
Yeah,
So,
I can see that.
In I guess where you are, I guess people are Christians.
For the most part. The culture is changing a lot. We've had a lot of people move in right now. This is happening. A lot of people moving in from California, New York, and Chicago,
Huh.
looking for the lower housing values. Because even though it's getting more expensive here for us, for people from New York or LA or Chicago, this is still very cheap. And so we're getting an influx of Yankees, more or less.
Mhm.
And I think that's going to change the culture here quite a bit.
So what I said was where, people are trying to fill this hole. Is that something
Mm-hmm.
that you've noticed? Is there any truth to that? Or is that just something that people are saying on the internet?
Well, is it okay if I talk about drugs?
Go for it.
Okay, so I have quite a bit of experience in the recovery scene. And one thing I have noticed among people who are recovering substance users is they tend to get a lot of them tend to get extremely religious, filling that hole. A lot of these people, many of them do not have a high school education. They get a GED. They have like lengthy felony records. Haven't worked a legal job in like decades. So their prospects are not good. Usually their lives are pretty abysmal. They work in like a fast food job or work in food service typically, and they have all these other problems in their lives. They don't have, honestly. I mean, I love many of these people, and I hate to be blunt, but their prospects are not good. Just be honest. So I think that's why they get so religious, or they just really throw themselves into the 12-step programs. And I think that's yeah, they're filling a hole
Hmm,
that was previously filled with drugs and alcohol.
I see. I suppose at least it's a good thing they're trying to, improve their situation. Do you see any improvement in those people that, to go through those
Um,
steps or those religions, I suppose, join the religion?
a handful of them, maybe. But so many of them are just, on and off the carousel. I've had about almost 20 friends die of overdoses in the
Wow.
last 4 years. So these were all people who've been through the program. It's just like, they relapse and they die.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'm not really convinced of the efficacy of these programs or religion for fixing it. I don't, honestly, I think the solution is to provide these people with better like vocational training, financial assistance, and maybe social skills training, like maybe keep them in like a rehab for a longer period of time to get them reintegrated back into society so that their future chances are better, and they have a better life and more to look forward to materially. But unfortunately, there really aren't any programs like that around. If there are, they're hugely expensive, or they're just too few and far between.
Hmm. All right, interesting. So, I guess another question would be, how did you seem, religion and history seem to be, when you, through academic career at least, your main interests?
Well, yeah, I grew up in a rather religious family. Not my immediate family of origin, but just we have a long history in the Catholic Church. Like my maternal grandfather was a former Jesuit, and all of his sisters were nuns. And so, I was, of course, baptized Catholic, went to Catholic school for the first 3 to 4 years of my schooling. So it's just my parents really weren't into it. It's just kind of a heritage thing, really, tradition. But, it's just always kind of there in the background.
Mhm. Did it particularly interest you much, or was it just
Um,
there?
I would say it didn't begin to interest me much until I moved to Tennessee. And I was having
Hmm.
to interact a lot with my ex's parents, and they were hardcore evangelicals. And it's like they kept like I had basically declared myself like an atheist at this point, and that really bothered them. And it's like they at first, because we were living in their house, they were like forcing us to go to church with them. We can't say no because we're living in their house for the first few months, and it's just constantly just coming at me like, why don't you believe in God? Why can't you be religious? And I was like, well, if I were to become religious, I'd probably become Catholic. And of course, evangelicals don't even think Catholics are Christians. So yeah, it was just a constant back and forth, and I just can't understand why this is so important to them. So I think that's why I started to become interested in it. But I gotta get some caught. Excuse me.
So this was your ex's family. That was.
Yeah.
Frustrating.
So, like, when I was saying that in the cities people are different, how is the situation in where you are? Like, how does the religion affect the culture and the people there?
I would say one of the oddest things I have noticed about my interactions with various people is that there are some people, like, you don't immediately know they're very religious or very hardcore until sometimes it comes out on social media. You'll see it on their Facebook page, or you might say something in favor of Roe v. Wade, and then it'll come out then. But yeah, there's basically like a lot of undercover evangelicals, if I can call them that here. It's like sometimes you just don't know who they are until you get to know them.
So does it affect, do people have like a similar idea on certain things there? Like, is there certain things that are different? Because, like, for example, when you lived in LA or San Diego, did you notice any differences due to people's religions affecting their life?
I would say here it really affects their attitudes towards gender roles and ideas about family. Like, for instance, I have never wanted to have kids. My ex, he already had some kids. He was quite a bit older than me. And so we didn't have kids, and that's just out of choice. And so I found now that I'm, getting a bit older, I get a lot of people asking me, so like, do you regret not having kids? Or asking me if I had fertility issues. And I was like, no, I just didn't want them. And they're like, oh my God, it's like, that's what you're obligated to do. And it's like, no, I'm not, It's like I never encountered that idea in Southern California, but yeah, here it's kind of ingrained.
Definitely. Wow. So so you think that's because of their religion, you think?
It's not like I really hung out in the evangelical culture, and I usually just avoid those people when they reveal themselves. So I don't know what goes on behind closed doors in their culture. I'm guessing that probably has something to do with that. I'm also wondering how much of it is due to the fact that, prior to the, 1930s and the development of the Tennessee Valley Authority, this was mostly like very rural, undeveloped area here in Tennessee. And it's like in these situations, you kind of need to have everyone who's able to having as many kids as possible to keep, to tend to the farms and keep everything going. And so I wonder how much of it is from that. But I don't know. It's just like if you question these people about why they think this, they can't really give you a good answer. It's just what their parents told them and what their pastor told them. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess I grew up Catholic.
Okay.
Yeah. I would say I'm Christian.
Okay.
But, some things about the Catholic religion are a bit gnarly.
Yeah.
I think overall, it's I understand why it exists. So I guess all these questions, I'm just sort of curious, because I had a similar, I wouldn't say I had a similar experience necessarily, but like I have a background just in religion. So I'm just curious, asking someone who, is so educated, has studied that. And so
So yeah, I think if I had a 17-year-old niece, I would suggest going in the military. Well, perhaps not now because they might be deployed into combat. But
are they deploying women into combat?
Yeah, I believe so. I haven't really been paying much attention to that, but who knows, what's gonna develop in the next couple of years. I mean,
Uh-huh. So your dad said join the military. Okay. Is that the advice you'd give to future to your niece,
well,
17-year-old niece?
well, I don't know about the military, but I don't think they should go to college right away. Let's face it, at 18, you don't really know anything. You don't know much about, how the world works or what you want to do with your life. So you should, maybe join the Peace Corps or something where you get some real world experience. I wouldn't necessarily say go get a job, because I mean, what kind of a job are you going to get at that age? You're going to end up like
Right.
doing fast food or something, or working at Walmart. I mean, how much does that teach you, really? You know.
Uh-huh.
So, but I definitely think they should find, some kind of, real world experience. You know.
Yeah, definitely. That makes sense. And then maybe see if they want to do college after that.
Exactly, because it's clearly not for everyone. It's part of why our industry exists. Because there's a lot of people going that shouldn't be going and don't want to go, but they're being pushed to. So, yeah, that's what I think.
That makes sense. I probably would say the same thing actually. I kind of like was told to go to college straight away. So I kind of went into college like not really knowing what I should study necessarily. So I kind of floundered around for a couple of years, which, I didn't have to, I paid for it, but in any case, in any case, all right. So you said that you got a PhD, and then there was a point when you had to figure out whether you wanted to become a professor, right?
Well, I was essentially pushed towards the down the professor path by my advisor and my dissertation committee. And so, I mean, that's why I went on the academic job market before I finished my dissertation, got some campus interviews, didn't make them, and then went on to UT Knoxville. So it's weird when you're in these PhD programs, you don't really, the job market is kind of bad, but there's so many stumbling points at which you can fall out of the program. Like you might fail your coursework, you might fail your comprehensive exams, you might not get the grants you need to do the research you want, So it's like you don't really, there's always a possibility the PhD might not come to fruition. So you don't start really thinking about the job market until you're actually on it.
I see.
And it depends on who your advisor is, really. It's like mine just kind of like, treated it like everyone who's good gets a job. That's just the way it works. No, it's not.
Did he like why why did he assume that? Why did he make it assume?
She actually.
She, sorry.
It was just her personality. It's like many of these tenured professors, they just think if it worked out for me, it's going to work out for everyone else. Mm-hmm. And they kind of stick their heads in the sand a little bit, or turn on blinders to, how bad everything is. So I think she's just really kind of out of it. And also all of my fellow advisees of her and we all kind of thought she's quite advanced in age. Just some of the things she did and said, we often wondered if she has Alzheimer's or dementia.
Oh my God.
So that might account for part of it.
I see. Okay. Wow. So back to the idea of if there's your niece, right? She's trying to get into academia. Are there any tips? Like, are there any things specific to the female experience that you're going through when you're going through academia? Anything that you noticed?
Okay, for various, how do I put this? Okay, so apparently sexual harassment is a huge thing in academia, and I'm looking back on my experience. Yeah, I did get it a little bit, but because of some parts of my background, these men don't really intimidate me, or, I just kind of brushed it off. so that was a thing. And then I did have a good friend. She got married halfway through graduate school, and she didn't get any grants to go abroad. She just wasn't competitive in that sense. But she eventually won like a 6-month grant to go to Brazil. And she declined to take it because she had just gotten married and she wanted to focus on her marriage. I remember her advisor was pressuring her strongly, like, I understand you just got married and all, but you just need to know that if you go on this grant, how good it will be for your career. You need to put your career first. And at that point, that friend of mine, it was becoming clear she wasn't going to be, she just, a very nice person, but she just wasn't very competitive. And it's clear she's not going to be a professor. And she actually had just given up on that dream and just said, I want to go work in admin or something. So, but yeah, I was just appalled by what because she showed it to the email to a couple of us, and I was just appalled at the way he was pressuring her.
Wow. She was trying to get her PhD as well?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. That's wild. So the advisor, her advisor, was it the same as your advisor? The same woman, or was it someone else?
No, it was her advisor. This same guy was actually my dissertation chair. There's only like a handful of Latin Americanists in the history department, so we all basically end up getting the same advisor or members of our dissertation committee.
Interesting. So I guess the key here is be careful what your advisor says. Don't necessarily trust them.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. That's critical. Okay, good point. All right. Let's see here. Okay, why didn't you become a professor? All right, so let's go back to let's see. So your dissertation, just to pull it up again, was tentatively titled Black Religions with White Faces, the Creolization of Religious Belief and Cultural Practice in Colonial Brazil, Angola, and Cuba, 1600, 1800.
Yeah, I think that was since amended to the first part, and then it was 1626 to 1889.
Okay.
Because the first instance I found of what I was looking for in the archives happened in 1626. And then I found some really interesting documentation from Cuba while I was in the National Archives in Spain and Madrid. And so I took it further into the 19th century because I just found some really interesting stuff. So that was
the documentation that you found when you were doing your archival, that was when you were doing your archival stuff, right?
correct.
Was that, so the interesting documents was that the Inquisition documents or some other document?
Some of them came from the Inquisition, others came from church records. These particular ones I was looking for in the 19th century Cuba, they actually came from police records.
So they were investigating these weird rituals that these people were getting involved in. Was that what it was?
Well, what it looked like was happening to me is these guys in Cuba were forming cults around these beliefs, but they were also committing crimes. So in a way, they were gangs, essentially. So that's why the police were investigating them, but they were also looking at all the weird ritual stuff they had.
So they were like gangs with like some weird spiritual connection, I guess. Weird.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. In 19th century Cuba, the police didn't care about the religious beliefs. What they were after them for was the crime.
I see. Okay. So those documents that you found were the police reports?
Mm-hmm.
What was so strange about them, or what was so interesting?
Well, because they were very detailed, and of course the police are going to be a lot less biased than a church official. And also because they were mentioning men of all different races participating in these gangs, like there were white Cubans, black Cubans, mixed Cubans.
So was it about? Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Was it the crime that united them, or was this sort of the religious aspect?
Well, that's hard to disentangle because it's just like these are like poor people in Cuba. They, form little gangs, for protection. or to make money or something, and then religion gets integrated into it somehow, and it all just becomes intertwined. Like they use the religion to identify themselves and to have like rituals that unify them, so yeah, it's very hard to, initially what they started out as is just way to make money and protect themselves in a hostile environment, really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So were these people Christians or were they into some weird stuff? So some of the
Um,
African, you said before that there were these slaves that they would bring over from West and Central Africa were bringing their religions. Is that the
mhm.
same situation with these people?
Yeah, it's basically like the religion, rituals and beliefs get passed down over time. I think these guys in 19th century, I think at that point most of them were not from Africa, but it's just the traditions and beliefs and rituals just kind of get integrated into the society and passed down, and people adopt them.
Uh-huh.
So I'm sure they are aware on some level, yes, this is African and from Africa, but you know, everything's local too. So
Right. Okay. Well, so um, when I've been traveling a bit, and I've come across people who like have gone to like Haiti and stuff, and they were telling me
uh-huh.
that in Haiti there's a lot of weird stuff going on, like a lot of like witchcraft kind of things.
Oh yeah, voodoo.
Yeah. And then when I was traveling in Indonesia, like I was on an
Oh
island where,
wow.
yeah, yeah, I was looking for waves actually.
Okay.
But the waves where we were like in some remote, super remote place, and we ended up on this island, which most Indonesia is like Muslim, but these people were Catholics or Christians.
Cool.
So they were like, we believe in Jesus. We believe in Jesus now. But before Jesus, like if you go to some of the outer islands, like they got some shamans with goat heads and all this weird stuff going on. And I was
Okay,
like, yeah,
yeah.
I believe it. So I guess my point is, what what weird stuff were these people up to, I guess, that you were doing in the research?
Okay. Well, I mean, I looking at police documentation, they're basically like making like ritual symbols, and they have like, diagrams of their various symbols that they use in an apparent ritual. It's like they're just, and it's the police talking about it. I mean, you're not going to have people being interrogated and immediately admitting to this, if they're under investigation. So it's just the police, just kind of speculating about what they are. Um, I didn't see any mentions of sacrificed animals or anything in these 19th century documents. However, when I went to Cuba, actually, I went in February 2010. As I was walking around the streets of Havana, there was one time I found a sacrificed cat at the base of a tree. Another time, a friend and I were walking to lunch from the archives, and we saw a severed pig's head surrounded by cornmeal on a street corner. So, I mean, I'm sure I looked at so much documentation. This is a while back, but I'm sure I've seen things like that in the documentation. But yeah, but I actually saw some of it in real life.
Wow. Was it eerie? How did you feel?
Well, when I saw the sacrificed cat, I mean, I felt bad because I have two cats and I love cats. But I was like, maybe I should take a picture of this. And then it occurred to me, I don't know, I'm in Havana. I'm kind of paranoid because this was a time United States citizens were only allowed into Cuba on a very limited basis. So I'm really paranoid about just being an American in Cuba. Also, I like maybe it would be disrespectful to take a picture of this, and I don't want to offend anyone. So I just kept moving along.
Huh, okay. So, another question. So, since you have an academic background, I suppose you're studying all this strange, I guess, paranormal, supernormal. Is that a accurate way to describe this? Like, how does that mesh
No,
with your, academic, you know, logical sort of
well,
perspective?
I'm looking at this from like an anthropological perspective, really. It's just looking at human ritual behaviors. I don't really believe any of this stuff. And, um, people, I mean, I won a lot of grants for it. so I don't see there was any conflict between the subject matter and being in academia. Some people thought it was a kind of odd, but it's also made me stand out and win grants. So,
Well, I suppose, like, for example, if you're in biology, you take these cells and then run an experiment on them, and then you see like sort of a result. But with like a ritual, it's harder to prove sort of like a connection.
yeah, and it's like, who knows what these people think they got out of it. Um, it's just,
What is your perspective looking at it from the third party? Like, what do you think these people are?
well, I
What's
mean,
their
I
viewpoint?
think, I believe, ultimately what it was all about was getting control over their environment. It's like, for instance, like in colonial Brazil, even the very wealthy people, it's like they don't have, the sanitation leaves a lot to be desired in that time period. People getting sick all the time, people die kind of young. It's kind of a nasty, brutish, and short life in that time for everyone. And it's a new society that's being built. They're still working out, you know, social class and hierarchies and everything, and it's still very underdeveloped. So I just look at these, rituals and stuff. It's just a way to feel like you have some control over your environment and over your life.
I see. Do you think that's partially why people are like going towards religion in the States, like you were saying before? Like all these people who are having struggles within their life, maybe?
Like people in recovery.
Yeah, people in recovery. You said people were like becoming more religious at some point. Like you're saying, these people were in like these hopeless situations. Some of these people.
Well, a lot of that is just, well, for one thing, a lot of these people grew up in the South, so I don't know how much of that came from their childhood. Also, you get this stuff forced down your throat when you're in like a rehab center, or you get to, other parts of the recovery system. So it's like you're told like this is the only way that you can get better. And it's like many of these people are not very well educated. They haven't really been out of this region or traveled a lot. You're not dealing with the most sophisticated people. It's just like they're scared they're going to die or scared they're going to go to prison. So it's like you just accept the help and just,
I see.
because they do a very good job of like showcasing the success stories, which are quite rare, but just like blowing those out of proportion and saying this could be you if you do this and this and this. Well, they don't mention that these people represent maybe like 5% of everyone. So
I see. I see that could be like an issue in many many different areas.
yeah.
All right. Okay. Also, okay. So the Inquisition documents.
Anything
Interesting. Anything interesting from those?
like for instance, the people I was telling you about in Salvador Bahia who were basically like pimping out their slaves to do rituals. Yeah, that came from the Inquisition documents. Oh, there was one instance that was really interesting from Angola. It concerned a guy from Portugal who got sent to Angola to serve in the military. And basically, how he ended up in Angola is he basically committed a murder in Portugal. They shipped him off to exiled him to Brazil. Did something bad in Brazil, so they exiled him to Angola, which is like the worst place ever, in that time period, because most of the Portuguese men who went there died from, various tropical diseases, or they just got killed or whatever. But anyway, this guy was very successful. He became a slave trader, got rich, and he was just, everyone who just, I found a lot of documentation about his life, and everyone who talked about him said basically the guy was a huge asshole. And he's basically just is extremely ruthless and will do whatever he can to get his way. So he made lots of enemies. So anyway, he ended up, a bunch of people reported him to the Inquisition for practicing these local religions, local African religions in Angola. And there was this long trial about it. This guy kept insisting, I had nothing to do with it. I don't do these things. This is, a lot of people hate me. They're making this thing up. This is a huge hoax. And eventually he had this guy, one of the reasons they didn't like him as well is he had like a whole harem of local concubines. And one of his concubines came forward and said, okay, I think what some of this might be related to is one time he was really sick. I wanted to help him. I didn't know what else to do, so I went and got a ritual healer. And I really believe he had no idea what was going on, but I had brought the guy in to do a ritual, but he didn't ask for this. I don't think he knew what was going on. So she came to his aid. But anyway, he ended up being convicted and sent to the Inquisition galleys in Lisbon, and he died in the galleys. But then later on, I found more documentation about his life. The Inquisition further looked at his case, determined it was actually a hoax brought about by this guy's rivals, and they posthumously lifted his conviction.
Wow. 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 Sheesh. What year was this?
This was 1785, I want to say, around so. Mid 18th century.
So the Inquisition was basically like the Catholic Church. They're like special forces looking for strange activity, right?
Looking for strange activity, looking for people practice, Jewish people, looking for people doing things like bigamy. They're also looking for homosexuals, sodomy, they also look for people who are Protestants. They don't like those people being in their areas, and so they hunt them down too.
Is that kind of stuff still happening? Is there still an Inquisition, sort of?
Oh no, it ended. It was terminated. I mean, many of the Catholic European countries each had their own Inquisition. I don't know when the Catholic Church officially shut them down, but I mean, they stopped really being active or being taken seriously by about the early 19th century latest. So yeah, there's no more Inquisition.
All right. I saw this interview with some like exorcist or something. He was some Catholic priest. You know anything about any of that stuff?
No.
Okay.
I didn't
Just
see
out of
any
curiosity.
exorcist. No, I didn't see any exorcist in the documents.
All right, let's see. Okay. That was just, personal curiosity. But all right, let's see. So any final thoughts on tips for people in the academic system? Anyone coming into college, trying to get a master's, PhD?
I would say thoroughly research your return on investment before you jump in. Like if you successfully complete this degree, what are your chances of actually getting a job in that area? What are your chances of getting like X amount of dollars? Like do your research, but just don't impulsively fly by the seat of your pants, like I did, or go to school because you think it's fun or because you think it's what society wants you to do. It's like thoroughly research everything before making the jump.
Mhm.
Okay, it's pretty good advice for anything in general. All right. Let me think. Is there think here. Tips for who would be most likely to use our services, academic composition? Would be a prime candidate.
Right now, I'm saying somebody like 30s, who's working, has a family, is having to go back to school for whatever reason. I would say that's the person who's most likely right now. It's just that over the years, I've seen a sharp decline in the number of undergrads we seem to encounter, but and I wonder about that. My many possible reasons for that, but I would think there'd be some undergrads, there's some gen ed courses that don't apply to what they plan to do with their lives, or they're just not interested in the subject and they're being forced to take it. Like, I would think they'd be a good candidate, like just not their whole program, but just cherry pick the courses you don't want to do.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. I think most people nowadays, it seems like they're working along with college, so
Yeah,
shortened.
yeah, it seems that way to me as well.
Mhm. All right. Do you have any questions for me? Any final?
Oh, where are you living?
So I'm
So
in
I'm
Costa
looking at the
Rica.
back. Oh, how fun. Have you
Yeah,
been there a
yeah,
long
let's see.
time?
Yeah, I've been here a couple years now.
Okay, cool.
I lived in New York in the city, and then I went to school in California. I
Okay.
ended up staying in California because I was like, I don't want to go back to New York quite yet. And then I worked in California for a while, like just in the corporate world.
Mhm.
And I got a little, it felt kind of soul crushing, I'm like, I need to do something else. So
Yeah.
like I remember this feeling where it was like I kept thinking like, oh, it's Christmas again. Like, and then another year went by, oh, it's Christmas again. Like, where did the year go?
Mhm.
So I ended up leaving that job, and I got a job as a surf photographer actually. So then I started traveling around taking pictures.
Oh, how fun.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
Costa Rica was one of the places, like, it was the second country that I went to when I started traveling.
Mhm.
And I was here for like a month, but then it was the one that got kind of like stuck in my brain. Like after I was traveling all these other places, but I always thought, I had such a good time in Costa Rica that I kind of want to go back. So
Oh, cool.
yeah, so I got some free, once I traveled, I was working for other people for a few years, but then once I kind of had more free time just to do my own things, then I came back to Costa Rica. And then just the more time that I spent here, I was like, I just kind of want to stay. So yeah, so
That's awesome. That's
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. So we'll see if you want to come down, let me know. If you want to come.
Okay. Yeah, I'd love to travel again. I've just kind of been stuck in Nashville for various reasons. But yeah, it's definitely something I'm going to do in the
Do you
future.
know anything about Costa Rican history? Just because you studied a bit of Latin American history.
That specific area, not really. I was pretty much focused on Brazil, Cuba, and the Atlantic world. What's the region called the Atlantic world? So yeah, I don't know a whole lot about Costa Rica. Do you know a lot?
I know a good amount. But
Okay.
I know more than I do about South America, actually.
All right.
South America just seems like so crazy because it's so big, it's so massive territory. And then you basically have like a lot of people coming from Europe and even Asia, like settling over there, and
Oh yeah.
a lot of ex-Nazis over there and a lot of weird stuff.
Oh, yeah, actually, one woman I went to graduate school with, she was, her mother was from Chile, but she was of fully German descent. And as I got to know her better, she disclosed that her grandfather was a Nazi war criminal.
Yeah, that's a common thing. Starting to come out more and more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess it's not funny, but yeah, I mean.
Yeah, that's, to me, South America is like this. I mean, I guess it's part of the New World. All these people just kind of went over there.
Oh yeah.
They've been kind of low key over there for the last 100 years, so who knows what's going on now. Anyway, on that note, well, hey, thanks for the interview.
All right, it's great talking to you.
If you need help with a writing assignment or help completing a college course, contact us at Academic Composition.